Hello, I'm Matthew and I'm joined by Tim Sykes, the current Bordeaux buyer, and we're here to talk about the 2023 Bordeaux En Primeur. I was lucky enough to join Tim out in Bordeaux for a few weeks at the start of the year because I'm actually taking Bordeaux over from the start of September, so it was amazing to get my first impression on Bordeaux and the En Primeur process. On which, Tim, would you mind giving us an idea of how you formulate an idea of the current vintage?
Yes, well, it actually all starts at harvest time because I always go out at least once around harvest just to see what's going on. A lot of people, when you come to taste the wines a few months later, will tell you that it wasn't raining or that the sun was shining. And if you were out there, then you know perfectly well what was going on. So it starts then, and then there's 2 tasting weeks that we do. Normally before Easter, and we basically taste through loads and loads and loads of wines. 1 week is the official En Primeur week, where this year Matthew and I went and did the tours of the top chateaus and went to various other tastings, didn't we? And then there's another week where we see some of the smaller chateaus, because you can't just taste everything in 1 week. And what you do is you taste and retaste the same wines, because quite often the samples vary and evolve quite considerably from one tasting to the next, from one day to the next. So the more you taste a wine, the better. And if a wine tastes well on every occasion that you've tasted it, then you know it's going to be a good wine. But it's a long and involved process, but it actually does allow you to figure out what the vintage is like. It might take a full couple of weeks to do it, but always at the end of it you get a good handle on the vintage.
Absolutely, yeah, it was amazing seeing wines, how they evolve, tasting them 3-4 times throughout the week. It was a fascinating process. And we've just finished offering some of the Top Chateau via email, and we're mainly talking about the main offer, which is going to be going out, am I right, in July this year?
Yes, it's going to be beginning to middle of July. The last of the prices came out today for our main offer, our main printed offer. It's now got to go to the designers and it's got to then be printed. So we think first or second week in July, and it'll be open for 2.5 weeks probably.
And am I right in saying that we do that mainly because members have said they like having something physical, they like having a booklet where they can peruse all the wines?
I mean, we do it in 2 separate ways, as you say. So we do email offers for the top wines, and that's because the wines get released, all other merchants in the UK offer the wines, and then we don't want to miss the boat on those wines. And also it's very difficult to predict the volumes that we'll sell, so we don't want to end up with masses of stock. So we've done those, we've offered those wines. Those have pretty much all gone out apart from a few stragglers to come. But the main offer, which is what we're talking about today, is the more modestly priced wines, where we offer about 90 or 100 wines. And these wines, members like to see the entire range of wines with all the prices out. We're one of the few merchants that still does a printed offer.
Yeah. Amazing. And so on 2023, what are your overall impressions of the vintage as a whole?
Yes, well, it's actually a very difficult vintage to encapsulate in a few words, and that's one of the struggles when I was writing the offer was to really explain how the vintage is. Last year, 22, it was easy to say, well, you know, it was a nice warm vintage and the wines are rich and et cetera, et cetera. This year, it's a little bit more complicated, but I would say it's a good to very good vintage, depending on the producer. The wines are 1% at least in alcohol lower than 22 vintage. They're appetizing wines. They're wines that have the structure to last, but they have lovely tannins. They are digeste is the word that the French use for this kind of vintage, and I think it's a lovely vintage. Prices are down for the top wines considerably, but for the wines in the main offer, they tend to be less volatile. They're not generally the kind of wines that are traded on the open market, and so the wines tend to be a little bit more stable in pricing. There are some price reductions compared with the previous vintage, but not to the extent that some of the top wines which have come down 30 or 40%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree. The vintage is this wonderfully fresh, very elegant, very pure vintage. Is that to do with the weather during growing season?
Yes. The vintage always reflects the weather conditions. It's interesting, quite a few producers that we talked to likened the vintage to 2001. Okay. And those members with long memories will remember 2001 was rather overshadowed by the previous vintage, 2000, because it was the millennial vintage. Mm-hmm. But actually has turned out to be a fantastic vintage. And I think 2023 will be another 2001. It won't overshadow 2022, but I think it will be a very good vintage in its own right that people will love.
Yeah, a very different style, but equally delicious. And so in terms of the printed offer, it's not just going to be individual bottles, we're also going to be doing some mixed cases, wines also in halves, magnums.
Yes, we'll do a small selection in halves and magnums, and we always offer some mixed cases. We've actually extended the number of mixed cases that we're doing this year because there's good availability. The weather conditions were such that generally it was a generous vintage unless you were struck down by mildew. Some people were unfortunate and the yields went down. Chateau Beaumont was badly affected by mildew because they have a kind of more or less organic approach. But no, I think the mixed cases are particularly interesting this year because we've got a fantastic couple of wines at the higher level that we're offering. So we're doing a mixed case of one bottle each of Lynch-Bage, Lèvres-Barton and Bran Cantenac, and we're doing one next step up on the ladder, which is Chateau Montrose in Saint-Estèphe, Chateau Pichon-Comtesse, Pichon-Lalande, and Chateau Ducru Beaucaillou. So those wines will be offered at the same time as all the others. And I think we should just mention that Sauternes, it's a fantastic vintage. Yep. One of the best in recent years, and we're doing a great mixed case of bottles and halves. So that shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah. And any particular picks that you'll be stowing away in your cellar from this offer?
Well, there are lots of lovely wines. I mean, it's very difficult out of 100 odd wines, but for me, one of the outstanding wines was in Margaux, which was Chateau Siran. I was lovely perfumed Margaux fruit. Langres-Barton, always good in Saint-Julien. At the more modest end of the spectrum, Beaumont, as always, is good, member favourite. Chateau Lanessan was good. Cisac was terrific this year. You joined me at Cisac, and the wine is super and extremely well priced. One last wine, Nectar, which is one of the most modestly priced wines that we offer, which is particularly good this year. Yeah. What are your favourites?
Yeah, you've mentioned a few of already, definitely. I think one wine which I was hugely impressed with is being offered later on in the year, which is Segler. I think it was an unbelievable wine for a second wine. It was super rich and very attractive. For whites, I'm a massive fan of Latour Martillac. I think the wines are so elegant and just what you want from a nice white Bordeaux. And from the Sauternes side of things, Sauternes Barsac, the Chateau Cantegril was just amazing, just so full of life and wonderful kind of noble rock character. Yeah, amazing. So that's kind of our overview of 2023. Do be sure to look out for the offer coming out in July, around that time. We're hoping mid-July. But yeah, a really fantastic vintage that we can't wait to share with you all in the main offer.
And good luck to Matthew taking over Bordeaux.
Thank you very much. Cheers.